Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on what time zone you're joining us from today. Welcome to our discussion today on Zero Trust Security. My name is Troy Navintran. I am a subject matter expert with VMware on the end user computing team, supporting our federal civilian agencies. Zero Trust means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So let's go ahead and dig a little bit deeper on what it means to VMware. And we want to show you how we can help you become successful with your zero trust journey. A little history and credit to a man named John Kindervag at Forrester that coined the term zero trust back in 2010. At the time, the principal practice theory or the methodology behind zero trust was to trust nothing, check everything, right? Although the principle still remains the same, there are other considerations that we must take into account. With the industry adoption of cloud within these past several years came software as a service, PaaS, IaaS, and a slew of cloud apps, right? There's also a need to securely access these resources and endpoints that perhaps are not behind the perimeter. These endpoints can be remote office workers during a COVID shutdown, contractors that are traveling abroad, or mission critical partners that need to share resources. With the latest identity protocols for modern auth, like SAML 2.0, OAuth 2, or just configuration of federation services for PIV, certificate-based or token-based exchanges, these all fall into an umbrella which we like to call the modern digital workplace or digital first workplace. Depending on what vendor you're talking to, you will hear these terms, right? Or mobile first. This pretty much breaks the traditional security model as more services behind the firewall needs to communicate with external entities just to make sure that everything works correctly. By allowing these connections, right, the attack surface has significantly increased. And once an attack occurs, whether it's from a malware, a phishing attack, a Trojan, or a man-in-the-middle attack, it's very hard to contain. And the chances of an attacker being able to pivot throughout the network laterally, right, and gaining more ground is highly likely. This traditional security model relied on firewalls, IDS, IPS, right, network access controls, and InfoSec given these end users access to the network, either through poking holes in the firewall, just providing VPN tunnels, right? We believe that this model, the traditional security model, is significantly out of date, and it wasn't designed with a modern workplace in mind, right? Mainly because the assumption, again, is that if you're inside the network, you should be trusted, and that's just not the case today. So here we look at a concept of micro perimeter, right? We believe that there is a better way to do this, and with micro perimeter, we can change how the architecture, from a single DMZ, large DMZ, to smaller, boundaries around each application and the application data, right? So if an attacker succeeds in penetrating one of these boundaries, he or she can only move to that specific boundary, right? Therefore being completely contained. This multi-layer approach, provides better security. It also includes the ability to add security around data and the application itself, right? Making sure that transport or access is secure. And having a strong understanding of the device and the user is going to be paramount to this method, right? With each security check happening at each layer, this enables you to extract audit logs and build analytics. And what I mean by that is that the more information that you capture, whether it's through logs, through APIs, through connectors like Splunk, third parties, the more information that you collect, the more analytics that you're able to take that information and then turn around and leverage that within intelligence, right? Analytical and intelligence to easily help provide your team with a holistic view, with a security posture for the organization, right? So now all application data are equally protected, and no users or devices are just trusted by default. So the foundation of IT security has looked pretty much the same for the past 30 years, right? It's built on static information that looks to validate if the endpoint is domain joined, right? If you're using the correct username or password, and if you're inside the perimeter, right? I'm sorry, that's my dog barking. But again, the good guys are outside, the networks are bad actors. Again, this model isn't designed for today's digital mobile first world. Over time, we evolved, right, this model slightly by adding VPNs and multi-factor authentication to address external access. Quick note on multi-factor authentication. There's a Forrester study done back in 2019 that stated just by turning on MFA, right, you're able to reduce the attack surface in your organization by 90% regarding phishing attacks, right? So that's a significant number that we're talking about. And if you haven't looked at enabling multi-factor at some layer in your organization or your agency, I highly recommend you explore that avenue. So now let's talk about the vision of Zero Trust and what it means to VMware, right? Zero Trust is not a single product, but a modern security framework that's built into our entire product stack. Zero Trust is conditional access control model that's required verification of trust prior to allowing application access. And when the access is granted, it's with least privilege. Now, what do I mean when I say least privilege? The principle of least privilege means granting only required access to applications or resources to the user for them to complete their job. No more, no less, right? By never trusting and always verifying. Zero Trust protects your data in applications, not only at the start of a session, but also continuous verification throughout, right, of users and endpoints throughout the application session. So what are the requirements for a Zero Trust architecture? 3 things. Continuous verification of endpoint compliance, right? So basically for access to be granted, endpoints must continuously be verified to be compliant with your organization's security policies. Second, conditional access controls to all applications, basically meaning that for any user to gain access to applications, they first must prove their identity, right? We believe strongly that the identity is the control plane into your resources, right? And that is the forefront of where Zero Trust framework is going to be put into play here. And reduction of the attack surface is what we're going to provide off this framework. So the Zero Trust architecture consists of 5 pillars: device, user trust, transport, application, and data trust. Right? We believe it's critical to establish trust in each of these pillars to make decisions or grant or deny access. By establishing trust across these 5 pillars, you can gain visibility and gather analytics across the board. So whether visibility and analytics are going to be a crucial or a critical part of your Zero Trust environment. This contextual awareness feeds intelligence, right? Allowing you to make just-in-time decisions and use automation for threat remediation. So here is a high-level overview of the Workspace ONE platform and how we incorporate Zero Trust across endpoints, IoT, VDI, apps, and networks. We believe that VMware is uniquely positioned to help you on your Zero Trust journey. We can provide you with in-depth device knowledge and management across all your devices using our Unified Endpoint Manager, or Workspace ONE UEM. We offer application lifecycle management and protection, as well as rich contextual conditional access, which is very important. And we will get into conditional access a little bit more in detail in the next couple of slides. Regardless of if it's a mobile native application, or if it's a VDI session, or if it's a HTML5 web app, we're going to be able to layer all these securities, controls, zero trust framework, analytics, intelligence on top of that. And lastly, by looking at our rich ecosystem of partners, we provide open API for any third-party integrations. So we believe that the VMware Workspace ONE platform is the easiest method to get started with Zero Trust. The path to Zero Trust is not a linear journey, right? And we need to think about how we are gaining visibility into endpoints to configure and monitor behavior and to check compliance. We also need to think about how we are enforcing conditional access policies that can be intelligent enough to realize that a user might not be who he or she says he is. And if that's the case, require MFA or restrict access altogether, right? Or perhaps he or she is who she says he is or she is, but perhaps is using a non-sanctioned device or endpoint to access those resources. We also need to think about, the fact that we are not unnecessarily opening up ports on the firewall, right? Or we're not opening up a full bore VPN tunnel to an application server, exposing the rest of the network and that server itself, right? When we're only required specific line of business apps within, right, within that server or the data pool, right? So we start to look at things like application tunnel, per app VPN connections, right? Just enough access, right? Just in going back to the point of we just want to make sure that we're giving the end users or the endpoints the access they need and nothing else, nothing more, right? And here we talk about how we automation and remediation and orchestration. So let's take a closer look at several specific functionalities behind each pillar. Device trust, by interrogating the device posture, we know if the device is trusted according to the policies that are put in place. Complete visibility into the device is important to establish trust, right? Products that directly map to device trust, it's going to be our Workspace ONE UEM product, Unified Access Gateway, Carbon Black, and Workspace ONE Intelligence. Historically, we also noticed that username and password just isn't enough. As conditions change, we need to start thinking about modern auth, right? The modern auth approach. We also need intelligence behind the scenes to invoke specific security controls. And we also need to be able to realize, what's considered a risky login behavior, right? Or provide some type of scoring metric that can be correlated and can be automated, right, to provide more of a holistic security posture on your environment. Conditional policy engines can make that decision based off dynamic and contextual data. And products that directly map to user trust is our Workspace ONE Access and our Workspace ONE Intelligence. Here, we leverage the principle of least privilege access to only provide and grant access to resources that are required. So the Zero Trust framework is built into NSX products or Unified Access Gateway and Horizon. Whether your resources are behind the perimeter or in a cloud using modern auth, we can provide single sign-on for the best possible user experience. We can also isolate applications or line of business applications that are developed in-house that perhaps are legacy and doesn't have the Zero Trust framework built into it, right? We can do this across any device on any operating system. Products that map directly to application trust is our Horizon, our Workspace ONE UEM platform, and our Workspace ONE Access. And finally, we need to ensure that data always stays secure and protected. So here we look at our conditional access, right? And it's very important to have a conditional access policy engine in the background that can handle granularity, right? And these are the four major signals that that we are collecting to make those decisions. User, as I mentioned before, is going to be the control plane for identity, right? You are who you say you are. You belong to a specific group. You have just enough access for a specific amount of time. The application you're using, right? Is this a sanctioned application that's being pushed out by IT, or is it something that's being sideloaded to the device that's going to possess security threats to the device and to the network, right? Is the application containerized? Devices, right? Again, we support from iOS down to Android, Windows 10, managed or unmanaged scenarios with Apple DP, Android Enterprise, and we do support a number of ruggedized devices out in the medical field and 911 and emergency response departments that leverage these ruggedized devices today that we support from a management standpoint, right? And lastly, location, right? Not just being able to to set a perimeter based off IP, right? Not IP addresses, right? Or but being able to set up a perimeter and geofencing to a specific down to less than a mile, right? There are some cases with third-party vendors we can work to even get these geofencing parameters down to several feet within office buildings. So basically, taking all those signals in those and bringing them into a compliance and policy engine to push out specific outputs, right? So are we allowing or denying these connections? Are we pushing out passcode, which is going to enable encryption on the devices, right? How are we looking at compromised devices? Are we going to notify the administrator? Are we going to block that connection for accessing corporate resources? Or are we going to perform a selective wipe, which means basically removing all corporate data from the device while keeping the rest of the device intact, right? And with data and apps, we 365 integration, also being able to prevent copy and pasting within the containerized environment. So I want to go ahead and conclude our call today, and we're here to help. And I believe that VMware, we have a very unique portfolio, and we built Zero Trust into our product stack, and we can help you get started on your Zero Trust journey. And I'll be sending links after this call, but if you go to techzone.vmware.com, there is a plethora of information and white papers on how we handle Zero Trust. I'll be reaching out to a number of you guys to discuss any interested parties, and I already got some feedback regarding cloud environments, 30-day trials that we can spin up. Our team at VMware is dedicated to ensuring that your mission is successful. And with that, I'd like to conclude the call. Thank you and have a nice day.